You are listening to the Love Unplugged podcast, episode 54. This feels like the perfect episode for this time while we're all experiencing COVID isolation, but it also applies to every day as well. Do you tend to visit the fridge one too many times during the day, even though you're not hungry? Do you tend to eat when you're sad, angry, stressed, or really experiencing any emotion? Do you feel guilt after eating? You may be emotionally eating. And I'm not going to lie, lately, I've been making so many trips to the fridge, even though I'm not hungry, and it's beginning to feel a little bit like my fridge is a lifelong friend that I'm reconnecting with after 10 years apart, and it's not a healthy relationship. So today we're diving deep into emotional eating, why we do it, and the steps we can take to rise above it. So grab yourself a cup of organic tea and get comfy. Without further ado, let's get to it. You are listening to Love Unplugged, a podcast focused on love in all its forms. I'm your host, Jessica Fergon, hopeful romantic and founder of Project Love. I found that too often love is set aside or taken for granted, and we tend to forget how to care for ourselves and our important relationships in the day-to-day chaos. So let's slow down, tune in, and begin our journey of rediscovering love. From honest heart-to-heart conversations with real couples and knowledgeable guests to deep dive reviews of new products and services that will help you feel beautiful inside and out. If you're looking for relatable advice or wanting to be inspired by real-life love stories, you've come to the right place. Without further ado, let's get to it. Hello, loves. Today I am so happy to be joined by Amber Romaniak. She is an emotional eating, digestive, and hormone expert who helps professional women achieve optimal health through mindful eating, self-care, and overcoming self-sabotage with food. Her podcast, the No Sugarcoating Podcast, has over 500,000 downloads, which blows my mind, over 200 episodes, and is listened to in over 82 countries, which is just so amazing. Congratulations with that. She was featured on TV personality Whitney Port's podcast, and she has also appeared on local TV 50 times in the last 3 years alone, which again is mind-blowing. Congratulations with all your achievements. I just love that so much.
Thank you.
Amber overcame her own emotional eating after gaining and losing more than 1,000 pounds and spending over 50,000 on binge foods and spending 5 years balancing her hormones and digestion. Now she helps others achieve body freedom so that they have the confidence and health to create amazing lives. So welcome, Amber. I am so honored to have you as my guest, and I'm so excited to learn all about your story and advice. But before we start, for those that don't know you yet, I would love for you to share a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me. I'm super grateful to be here with you today. It's always so great to connect with other amazing women, sharing, and creating space. So thank you for having this show and having me. So yeah, I am in my business, which I've had for just about 7 years now, I coach women all over the world who are struggling with, a food addiction, emotional eating, digestive and hormone issues, the weight and body image struggles, diet addiction, which I think is a real thing as well. And aside from that, I do my podcast. I do lots, of TV stuff and getting into more speaking and doing health retreats and things like that. So I'm very grateful for personally what I have gone through on my journey and that it, evolved into a business where I can now help other women. And then aside from my business, I absolutely just love being in nature and I'm really in a very solid self-care routine that's very important and sacred for me to tend to my physical and emotional health. Which I'm sure we'll talk more about self-care as we get going in here and just spending time with family and boyfriend and more so just at home right now. But it's just so nice to, I guess, have a home office and be able to work from home right now because not a lot has really changed with everything going on. So I'm able to support all my clients and we've created our home into quite a sacred space. So it's quite easy to be at home and have everything we need here and feel safe and feel comforted and have a relaxed space. So that's a little bit more about me.
I love that. So a lot of people right now are probably struggling quite a bit with having to change that work environment from being in an office space with employees and that stuff to now having to work from home, which, I mean, I've done both. Obviously, the podcast and the blog that I focus on, I do it from home and whatnot, but I do have a day job. And that change alone has been definitely a big change for me. Just being able to create that same environment at home where
Mhm.
I can still feel as productive as I would be in the office. So, do you have any tips on how we can do that?
Oh, for sure. I think, there's so many good things that we can do right now to help build a routine at home. And I don't mean like you have to, unless you thrive off of this. Some people thrive off of having like a very solid routine to go through every day, but allow for flow and flexibility, because with everything going on right now, we have got to be flexible and allow a bit more flow. So, build a routine. So, what time are you waking up? And then, nourish your body and have breakfast. Are you throwing in a little bit of mindful movement or a stretch or a yoga or some kind of self care before you start your day? If you are working from home, like get dressed, do your hair, put on like an outfit that like makes you feel good, or wear what you would have worn to work if you want, or work in your pajamas, I guess, depending. But I find some people are saying, oh, I'm loving still, preparing myself in the morning just as I would if I were leaving the house to go to work. I think it's also important to slot in like blocks of self care through the day, whether it's 5 minutes or half an hour, depending if you're working or not. Maybe it's time to take up a new hobby. Maybe it's time to get into that book series or that coloring book, or, an online program that you've been like putting to on the shelf for the last few months or years. Set up social time to FaceTime or, call and connect with friends and family and colleagues. And then again, dedicate times to sit and eat your food mindfully at the kitchen table without work, without distractions of phones and TVs, and connect with, the other people in your household. And if it's just you, put on relaxing music and connect with yourself and your food. Get more sleep, get your 8+ hours, nap if you need to, take up a funny TV series. Like, I think we can have a balance of like self care between meditation, deep breathing, journaling, and yoga. And then you can still have that funny show that you look forward to watching as well. What I really lovingly, hopefully, don't encourage people to do is just be sitting on the couch all day, checking out, watching TV and eating, because it can become a very self-sabotaging behavior. That's one of the biggest emotional eating triggers I actually used to have. Was as soon as the TV would go on, I would start eating, and I just wouldn't stop eating until I was like so full. So I just think, we can really establish a new routine, and whilst it may be uncomfortable and maybe foreign, the more you get into it and establish it, you'll get to know the things you really like and want to do more often, and you'll notice the benefits that you will feel better emotionally and physically, and that you will then look forward to this routine. And my last suggestion is to set boundaries with the news, the media, and how much you're informing yourself. Also, I think it's so powerful to be informed. I think that we can get pulled into the rabbit hole really easily, and that, I'm spending maybe a few minutes throughout the day at some point, maybe every day or like once every couple of days, because like we're at home, there's not a lot we can do. I want to be updated. At the same token, there's a lot of intensity with getting into reading articles and watching videos and stuff. So I just think it's so important we tend to our minds and bodies right now, and that we can use our routines and use, so many different things at home to help us with that.
That's just such amazing advice. Thank you for sharing that. I know that a lot of people are going to benefit from hearing those tips, especially right now. But let's start at the beginning. I want to hear about your personal journey. What was your daily life like, and how did you become aware that you were struggling with emotional eating?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So, for me, there's a couple things I want to highlight that happened before I even this really started for me when I was 5. And it was my first day going on the school bus. And I share this in every podcast interview because I think it's so important for people to understand that a lot of people that have struggled with body image or emotional eating or any of, body insecurities, like there's usually at least one defining moment, if not a few, that happen throughout your growing up that can really fuel all of this. And for me, it was when I was 5 on the bus. And I will never forget, like, the 5-year-old brown-eyed me with a mushroom cut getting on the bus, excited to make new friends, excited for a new experience. When you're 5-year-old, you're so innocent and you're so open. And I got on the bus, and right away the older boys started calling me fat and ugly and just yelling at me. And then the whole back half of the bus was like making fun of me and laughing. And it hurt. It broke my heart. I sunk. I just felt myself like contract inside. And I thought, well, if strangers are saying this to me, it must be true. And I really took that identity on for the next 20 years of my life. And I dieted all through my, once I hit 10, I was dieting and, thought that in order to be loved or accepted by anyone else but your parents, especially men, or like for a job or career, you had to be this thin, pretty looking girl. And, that's the way that it had to be. And so I really took on that like mindset and would diet and like drop a couple pounds and gain it back. And then for me, really what started to fuel the binge eating when I hit about 21 was number one, I never knew how to handle stress. I didn't have any healthy ways to cope with it. I get so stressed out about the biggest things. I would worry about stuff that just like wasn't even happening, right? I'd worry about the future, worry about all these things that weren't happening. And then like it would really make me suffer a lot in the present moment. I didn't know how to feel or process my emotions or cope with them. I ate whatever I wanted whenever I wanted. There was never any control of quantities. My mom had and still to this day, has a very emotional relationship with food. And I think part of that for her was her diagnosis with multiple sclerosis before I was born, and just not knowing how to handle that, very big changes, it's scary. Like, I think thinking and just watching how it's impacted her and the massive decline that has happened for her over the last 30 years has been significant. And so I can just imagine how much that impacted her and my dad, when they got that news, when she was about 30 years old. And it still tears me up because it just had such a significant impact on my growing up, me not really having necessarily a lot of emotional support from my parents because they're trying to deal with that. And I would hear from both parents because I was the only child, and it's not to blame and it's not their fault, but I think it just really made me feel like I had to like deal with everything on my own. And I didn't necessarily have that like motherly relationship growing up where like she taught me how to put on makeup, or like we'd go shopping or do a lot of things that moms and daughters do together because it was just hard for her to get around and like walk long distances. So, it was something that then to compensate, we would eat and she would buy me whatever I wanted and she'd eat, and food would be involved in everything. And so I think I just like innocently inherited some of my emotional eating habits and the sugar addiction, just that it was innocently passed on. And so I think for me, like I always hated my body. I always felt I was just a little bit overweight and that I wouldn't be lovable until I lost the weight. And it's when I got to this place where a relationship ended and I physically just couldn't eat because I was so upset. And I lost weight really quickly. And then I was super excited. And then I started exercising like 2 hours a day. And it made me feel like unstoppable. I'm like, yeah, look at my body. I'm perfect now. Like, I got so arrogant. I got so even more picky about my body. I wasn't happy, even though I quote unquote had attained my goal weight at the time, which was way too thin. My cycle disappeared. My health started to decline. And then it became very difficult to attain my new routine of, really restricting my food a lot and doing this over exercise. And then one day it was just like, this is so hard to attain. The guy doesn't want me back. I like life isn't perfect, screw it. And then that's when the binge eating, like it really flipped a switch. So I'm 21 years old. I have a crappy retail job. Like I'm broke. I am so upset. I'm so alone. I dislike my body. I'm now fighting and binging with food and diets and restriction, attracting negative things into my life. And there was this huge void that was there, this lack of self-love. Like I always thought, oh, you get into a relationship with someone and they like fulfill you, like they love you and like they make you happy. And I didn't realize that it was so important for me to learn how to love myself and that it's my own responsibility to fulfill my own happiness. And then you align with the other right person and you don't rely on them for their love and happiness, that you freely give it to each other, and at the same time you both already are whole. And so for me, because I had all these assumptions that were obviously not in alignment, I ate to try to fill the void. For me, binge eating, it was not just eating a cookie and then feeling guilty. It was eating like 20 cookies. Like I'd bake a whole batch of muffins, of 12 muffins, and eat them all at once. I could eat, multiple chocolate bars and pints of ice creams and bags of chips and sandwiches and pasta. And it was always multiple items. Like for me, binge eating really was a complete loss of control and not stopping until I was just so full that I was sick. And I did go through a period of about 6 months where I did binge and purge, but luckily I was able to stop that because I was thinking to myself, I don't want this to have a, continuous significant impact on my health. And by purging, I'm not taking responsibility for what I'm doing. And so while I would binge, then I started to go, nope, you're not going to do that because it's really violent and you're not taking ownership. So I think that started to help me think about, okay, if I binge, I need to take ownership of it. But it didn't make it any easier. And I just, I'd lose and gain. I'd gain like 50, 60 pounds and then I'd lose a bit. And then I'd gain more and lose it. And it was just like this vicious cycle. Like, I'm not kidding when I say in 5 years, I lost and gained 1,000 pounds. Like I really did. And that was so hard on my body. And for me, really what was the turning point was about a year and a half later. The binging was just horrible. I was at my heaviest. I was isolating. I never went out. I wasn't social. I didn't date. I was afraid for people to see me and judge me. I just felt so alone, so embarrassed, and so shameful. And nobody knew what I was doing. I didn't want to tell anybody. And I'll never forget one night just being in my little apartment. I had just finished a binge and I'd always throw the food away in the garbage. And was laying on the couch in tears, just like fearing for my life, really, because I thought, how much longer is my body going to keep putting up with this before I get seriously ill or I'm just not here anymore? I want to, have a successful career. I want to have a family, or like I want to, fall in love and get married. And I want to have healthy relationships and adventures and do all these great things. But like, I can't do that right now because of the state that I'm in. And it was devastating to be 23 years old when you're supposed to be having the time of your life and be in this space. At the same time, I have so much compassion for the 23-year-old me because she didn't know, any better. And I know a lot of women who struggle from a young age, and my message is to just have compassion for yourself no matter where you're at with this, because sometimes we need, not that I want people to, but sometimes we need to have a really low point to have a wake up call. And for me, that low point was an hour after I'd finished the binge and felt really upset about everything. I went and opened my cupboard. I pulled out my little blue garbage can and I dug through the garbage to eat the cookies. And then I just sat on the floor and cried and was like, I just ate out of a garbage can. Like, it's now when I think about it, I think I've done so much work on it that like I'm neutral now. Like I have compassion, and it's sad to think that I did that. But that was like, 9, 10 years ago. Like it's something that I kind of can't believe I used to do that, to be honest with you, because I'm just in such a different space now. But that is the moment that really inspired me to say the suffering is bigger than my fear of wanting to change and my fear of going into the unknown. And so therefore, like, I'm done suffering. I can't be afraid anymore. Like, I need to address this and deal with this. So largely in the beginning, it was a lot of physical, like reading about food, for example, like reading about sugar and that it's 10 times more addictive than cocaine. And sugar was my nemesis. I'd always lose control with it. And that gluten and dairy were making me bloated. And that gluten and dairy are the inflammatory, or gluten and casein that's in dairy, are inflammatory proteins that can also mimic opioid-like receptors. And I'd always lose control with food items that had sugar, dairy, and gluten. And so reading about the brain chemistry and how these foods were making my brain behave and produce these feel-good neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, it like blew my mind. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't feel like there's anything wrong with me more. I feel like I really have this addiction to food, which actually made me feel a bit better. It made me feel a bit more empowered because I was starting to like become informed and like feel like, even though I'm still struggling with this, like there's nothing wrong with me, because I think we start to assume like there's something wrong with me. I don't have enough willpower when it has nothing to do with willpower. And then we just get really hard on ourselves. So first of all, I cut out wheat, sugar, and dairy. It took dozens of attempts. Like it was not easy. The binge eating would be up and down, and I'd come off of them and have drug like withdrawals for like a week. It was really hard on my mood and my gut health and all sorts of things. But finally, I successfully cut them out, and I noticed that I was binging less. But then, I'd still want to do it and eat like 10 bananas and a jar of peanut butter, or like a whole bag of brown rice pasta and a whole package of goat cheese. And so that's when I knew it wasn't just about, changing certain food items or changing the way that I ate, that's where this emotional journey was starting, understanding I didn't like my body. I didn't know what self-love was. I didn't know how to cope with stress. I didn't know how to feel my emotions, or that it was safe to feel, and that I was eating to numb myself out of my reality, distract myself, and to shove everything down. So that's when I really started exploring the emotional part of the journey, which was like understanding what triggered me to emotionally eat. That, I wanted to catch my negative self talk and stop dieting and stop being obsessed with a certain number on the scale, and learn how to love and accept my body, which took some time. But upon, reading books like You Can Heal Your Life by Louise L. Hay, and getting into a meditation practice, deep breathing, taking baths, getting into nature, journaling. Oh my gosh, I don't know how many journals I went through and wrote pages and pages and pages, but it was so therapeutic, and still to this day but it was getting into a self-care routine and understanding I couldn't get too busy because that would overwhelm me and trigger me to binge. Or if I hung out with certain friends, it would trigger me to binge because they wanted to eat and drink everything and they didn't know I was struggling. So it was kind of that accumulation of, changing the way that I ate for a while, and doing this emotional work that really made me realize how much more emotional eating actually is. And then what came below that was this exploration of, wow, I have an intuition, which at first scared the crap out of me because I was feeling things, I was seeing the future things, certain things, gifts and empathy, and feeling other stuff. And it scared the crap out of me. And then I wanted to binge to shove it down. But realizing that it was safe to feel, and also, that we all have our own gifts, and that I wanted to open up to that, it really inspired me to fully overcome the binge eating, food addiction, whatever you want to call it. It was kind of all of those things. And to really learn self-love and to be consistent with my self-care. My friends circle shifted because I was hanging out with a lot of people that were in self-sabotaging behavior. And that's when, I really knew how much of a priority it was and how much I thrived off of, like, working on my mindset, eating good food, allowing for a little bit of indulgence. But in the beginning, I just had to be mindful because sometimes I would be afraid to eat sugar for fear of the past repeating itself. So, still to this day, I don't really eat a lot of wheat or dairy or refined sugar because I just don't think they're very good for everybody. And in moderation, fine here or there. But I have so many recipes and we have so many alternatives in the house that it's normal for us to eat the way we do, and we really like it. But it was essentially that, that brought me to this point where I'm like, if I struggled with what I did, how many other people, especially women of all ages, are struggling with this, whether it was not as intense as I was, or worse. And, there's a stat that is 90% of the female population in North America is or has struggled with some form of, body image issues, weight struggles, emotional eating, eating disorder. Like, that is significant. And then the other stat is that 85% of the North America population that diets fails and gains the weight back plus more. So we know that diets don't work. The eat less, exercise more mentality is so archaic, yet it's so shoved down our throats. Yet when I talk to 100% of the women who reach out to me as to, why they're struggling, they say, I've tried every diet and nothing is working. And I go, well, yeah, 100%, because diets just are not going to help us address what is such a deeper journey here. So that's what led me to starting my business and specializing in emotional eating, digestion, hormones, and I have my background in certified holistic nutrition, and it's been a beautiful journey ever since. And I feel like even though I went through like the depths of like the darkness, I found my soul and my soul purpose. And I think, why I'm here on this earth, to really help end the suffering of this unhealthy relationship we have created in society with food and our bodies.
Amazing. There's so many questions I have on your journey. It's amazing to me how much of an impact what other people say at such a young age can have on you, and how
Mhm.
it can really define what your life is going to be like going forwards at such a
Yeah.
young age. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it just blows my mind. And I so relate to the fact that, innocently you did adapt to some issues that your mom was struggling with as well. And I've had that experience with my mom. She was not well when I was young, and she wasn't emotionally available for me. So
Mm.
I was very much on my own, just like you, kind of figuring things out and trying to raise myself in some ways. But some issues that she was struggling with, because you're so, what's the word? Like, you're just watching everything that your parents are doing and people around you,
Yes.
you kind of pick up on things and you're so impressionable at that age that
Yeah.
I took on some of her stories and made them my own, even though that's not my truth.
Oh, and I can so relate because I did the same thing, and my mom was always talking about how she felt stupid and she felt useless and she didn't like her body, and because she was very overweight and still is. I think she put on so much protection after she found out
Mhm.
what happened, and it just from there, like I think that really triggered for her like her food addiction.
Mhm.
So yeah, when that's your role model, and like there's so many good things about my mom, but yeah, when you're growing up, you take all that on because you think, well, this is like my mom, she's like my idol, and like so but there's a part of me that just felt so bad because there's so many things that I witnessed at a young age, that were just so sad to see your mom, like this person who had you and is raising you, like having issues with like, she some days she couldn't drive because like her foot would go numb. And so like she'd have to get extra help with that, or like walking really slow, or getting to the point where she needed a walker and she was only like in her 40s, or,
Wow.
bowel issues, or just like things that like most people would never even think of. Like now here I am witnessing these things, and it was just like so hurtful at the time to see someone you love so much go through so much suffering. And it makes me emotional because I just had this vision of her, back when I was probably 8 or 9, just so upset. And it's again, I do a lot of work on it and releasing the grief, but sometimes you just have those moments where it just comes up, and you feel that like 7-year-old you, or that 8-year-old you, and how hurt she was or how upset she was about seeing that. And that's when it's an important opportunity for me to actually go inward and connect with that younger me and be there for her, and comfort her with kind words and love and compassion, and then send love to my mom. um,
Mhm.
I just think that's so important for us to go back to those experiences and not shove them down or think like that's the past. I don't want to think about it anymore. Like if it comes up, we can have compassion for it, and love, and have it be part of our healing journey forward.
I think it's so important to never push away the feelings that come to surface
Yeah.
from the past or whatever. Deal with them when they come up, because the more you push and repress things, the worse it's going to get in the future when they come up. It's like it builds and it
Oh yeah.
accumulates like a snowball, right?
Yeah, and I don't know about you, like if you are into Louise L. Hare, like the whole concept of, yeah, like your thoughts create your future and your cells are listening to your thoughts. But the more I've been on this journey and coaching my clients, and just like my journey with my own body, like your cells are listening. Like the only time I really ever get a physical symptom is when I am experiencing some kind of emotional stuff. Like I really believe dis-ease does start in the mind, and that like the way we eat and treat our bodies just like kind of fuels our body to
Mhm.
deterioration, or to like having symptoms, or manifesting some kind of an illness. Like I don't just think it's like, well, you have bad luck and you end up with something. Like I really think there's between like shoving emotions down and grief and traumas that we don't deal with, and then like, you know yeah, I just think it's so connected, and it's so underrated, and it should be something that we really support more with people's health. Because I just remember having certain symptoms like with my digestion, and the more upset or frustrated I got about it, the worse the symptoms would get, and the sooner I could like come to acceptance with it, and then be kind to my digestion, and like say nice things and like do good things for my body, the sooner it would go away, right? Like it's just so powerful the way that our mind impacts our physical state of health.
Yeah, I totally believe that your thoughts and your emotions manifest themselves into material, either illness or sickness or whatnot. So it's so important to be aware of the thoughts that you're having and the emotions and dealing with them when they come to surface, and taking care of yourself on that level is so important.
Hmm.
So I want to talk about that pivotal moment. Was that when you found yourself going through your garbage, eating the cookies? Was that the moment where you're like, this has got to change. Now I got to put something into action to change my behaviors and how I'm dealing and treating myself?
100%. Yes, that was really the defining moment for me, because I think what had been happening up until that point is I was like, well, I want to change, but I'm afraid of who I would be without food. Like I've started to revolve my entire world and focus around food between binging and planning my meals and snacks and trying all these quick fix diets and obsessing about my weight. Like, who would I be without all of that? And so the thought of now there being this big void and food not being my best friend, like, I think it really scared me. And so I'd be like, okay, well, whatever. Like, maybe I'll work on it next week, or I'll figure out or want to change something next month. Right. So, but then when I did that, it was just like, it was so embarrassing and so I just can't believe, like, I couldn't believe I did that. Like, so I think it was just like, no, like, I know I'm afraid of what may happen or afraid of failing. I'm afraid of it not working and not getting there. I'm afraid of good things happening. But I'm like, the suffering that I am going through physically, mentally, and emotionally is now bigger than the fear. And so I think that for me was just like, okay, fear, you're there, but like here I am in the jungle with like my little like axe to like chop my way through and make my own path. Like I have to do this. Like I don't have a choice unless I
Mm.
want to get really sick or not be here in like 5 or 6 years. Like it really, to me, just there was something inside of me that's like, you're not going to have the kind of life you want if you keep on this path, right?
Do you think it's important for people to get to that, maybe not rock bottom, but to that moment that forces them to act? Like, do you think that they have more of a chance of recovering and, dealing with those behaviors when they get to that place?
Sometimes yes, because I think people just suffer so much and they're so tired of it, and they're exhausted mentally, physically, and emotionally, and their health is declining, their symptoms are getting worse, and they're just like, I'm at wit's end. I've tried everything. Again, usually mostly diet stuff. Nothing has worked, so I need something different. So for some people, they do need to hit a low point or have a quite a low point or a wake up call. I encourage people to try to not get to that point. You're gonna have fear, that's inevitable. You're going to be afraid to fail. You're going to be afraid to step out of your comfort zone and try something different. You might be afraid to financially invest in your health. But what you have to remember with fear is fear freezes. Fear blocks us from good things, and everything we want is on the other side of fear. So, as long as we're letting fear and our ego, which is, I believe, our self sabotaging mindset, convince us that we shouldn't do anything, keep doing what you're doing, you just have to try harder, like it's not worth it, or like, I'm not worth it, or any of that, all that negative self talk and those stories that come up, as long as we let that lead us, not a lot's going to change and we're just going to keep suffering. But if we can go, you know what, I'm afraid, this is going to be different. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm open. I feel safe like getting this support, or I feel safe talking to this person. I want to have an expansive life. I want to have, happiness and optimal health and have freedom from this. Then you will acknowledge the fear, but you will work through it.
Mhm.
And I think that's so important, is that you're going to have your ups and downs. This isn't about perfection, but if you can just be open, that is a very powerful first step to take.
I love that. All right, so let's break it down for people. What exactly is emotional eating? What are the self sabotaging behaviors that come along with it so that people really have an understanding of if it applies to them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, emotional eating to me is any reason for eating other than for physical nourishment. So, it could be anything from boredom. You're eating because you're happy, but you actually just had supper. Like that's emotional eating. It could be because you're stressed. You could, be triggered to emotionally eat because you're dehydrated, you're tired. You just saw a commercial and it's triggering you to want to go dig through the pantry and eat. Eating and watching TV, eating and working, that's mindless eating. That is also emotional eating, in my opinion. To me, that physical nourishment is about sitting down with your meal, being present with it, chewing slowly, fork down between bites, so you can tune into your hunger cues and see when you're full and stop when you're full. And also, they'll be satiated. And if you're satiated and satisfied, you're not as likely to be digging through the cupboard. So I think emotional eating happens for so many reasons. And I know right now a lot of people are bored, or they're uncomfortable, or there's a lot of stress and fear and panic with everything going on. And so it's fueling emotional eating because people don't want to feel. And I often find we're emotional eating to suppress our emotions, to shove them down, to numb ourselves from reality, distract ourselves from reality, avoid dealing with our stuff, dealing with our emotions. And also, a lot of the foods that we are emotionally eating have ingredients in them that make us produce a high or have a pleasurable experience. And so when you start thinking about or start, eating that food, you get that sugar rush. You bite into that cheese or that creamy pasta sauce, like you experience that comfort or that just tastes so good, and then you produce that serotonin and dopamine, and you actually have that high. And there's a part of the brain, that stores pleasure memories called the hippocampus, but there's no part of the brain that stores how crappy you feel after, how bloated and guilty and angry and frustrated and in regret you are. So you have to remember that there's so many layers of what can like fuel the habit of the emotional eating to continue. And I do believe there's different levels of it. So, if you're emotionally eating, that could mean you eat like one cookie, but you're eating it because you're sad. It could mean you're eating the whole bag of cookies, 5 bags of cookies. That's the binge eating is really, once you start, you lose control and you can't stop, and you eat through, multiple items, or you eat until you're so full that you feel sick. And then to me, what is the food addiction is really like, you're thinking about food all day, every day. You're obsessed about food. You love it and you hate it all at the same time. You're out of control with it. So you're like, for me, like I would make up stories when I was at a social event or an outing that I had to leave because something had happened. But really, it's like I got triggered and my cravings were so intense that I had to like speed to the store, buy the food before it closed at 9 o'clock so I could go home and get my fix. And then it was again that uncontrollable eating, but it was just like this massive love-hate relationship, either, thinking I need to be perfect on my diet. And if I'm not perfect on my diet, well, then I'm going way the other way and I'm binge eating. And it's really is that addiction, that obsession. So it's different for everybody. But to me, it's any reason for, eating other than for physical nourishment. And so I see diets fuel a lot of emotional eating, because diets convince you that if you restrict your calories or you follow this perfectly, you'll lose weight and get these results. And so then we think, okay, well, if I follow this perfectly, I'll get these results. And I want those results because I think that in order to be good enough, I have to be a certain weight or look a certain way. So I do see at the core of a lot of people's self-sabotaging behaviors with food, which is a belief of, I don't feel good enough, I'm not worthy. So therefore then they go, in order to be worthy, I need to be perfect looking. I need to be a certain size in my clothes. I need to weigh a certain amount. And let's face it, like kind of society has convinced us that that is what we need to do. And we're seeing shifts now, but, growing up, like when I was reading through 17 magazine and every photo is Photoshop, but I thought that this is normal and this is how, women are supposed to look. Like you really are convinced that this is the way it's supposed to be. So I think we're not taught how to love ourselves. We're not taught how to cope with stress. We're not taught how to build worthiness within and to build enoughness within. So how is it possible when we're in this world where we don't feel good enough and there's all this stuff going on to not go to food or not create a coping mechanism with food, because food is everywhere. And it's kind of joked about, like, oh yeah, I totally like emotionally ate through all this stuff. And I don't think we should be joking about emotional eating. I don't want people to feel embarrassed or judge themselves or be hard on themselves if they do it, but I don't think we should be making it a society norm or acceptable to hurt your body with food, because that's essentially what people are doing. I know it can seem so innocent, but it can become a very vicious cycle, and it can have a very negative, significant impact on your physical state of health, your hormones, your gut health, your immune system. This is really a time to be tackling emotional eating if you do struggle with it, because excessive consumption of refined foods, MSG, refined sugar, aspartame, like is suppressing your immune system, and it's making you more vulnerable to what is going on in the world right now. And we don't want that to happen, right? So people do not understand the significant impact it has on your physical state of health. And then, of course, your emotional state of health and the fight that you're having with your weight and your body. So I think that's a huge component of the self-sabotage. And I don't think we're taught how to cope with our emotions in a healthy way. And I think that's another part of the self-sabotage. We're told to just like be tough, be strong, don't cry. And I don't think that's okay to promote that, because then we just think we have to shove it down and hold it all together. One other aspect of that fuels this vicious cycle is from our mindsets, our habits, and the actions we take. So if you don't feel good enough, you don't feel worthy, okay? You often want to people please, or you want to try and overachieve to show everyone that you're good enough, or you want to try to be perfect, or you're in this space where you're just overbooking your schedule to take care of everything and everyone else. But then what ends up happening is you end up overwhelmed because you're saying yes to everything and everyone else and no to yourself. And we have our own emotional and physical needs that we do need to take care of. And if you're not doing that, you end up overwhelmed, upset, like tired, not feeling well, gaining weight, having all these symptoms starting to happen, whether you're bloated, your bowel movements are off, your PMS symptoms are through the roof, you're not sleeping well, whatever they are. You don't feel good in your body and you get frustrated with your body. You lose confidence in yourself. And then what do? We turn to food or we shop. Some people smoke, some people drink alcohol. But for most people, they have some form of coping mechanism that is not actually helpful for their health in any way. And that overbooked schedule continues to contribute. And now we're seeing kind of a flip where now people all of a sudden have more time and are at home and have a lot of food in their pantries. And so they're going to that and they're overwhelmed because now they have to sit with their stuff and they don't want to deal with it. So they're using the food to distract themselves. So I think this is a great time to, like I said earlier, build those routines and actually address the emotional eating, address your self sabotaging behaviors with food, learn how to be nice to yourself, learn how to catch the negative self talk, bring in the self care. And disconnect from food a bit more. Like, try to not revolve your whole day around food and instead build all these activities and things you could do that are non-food related and focus on food being the physical nourishment. Now, easier said than done. It does take time, work, and oftentimes support for people to like fully gain the freedom, but you can always start with these, some of these other suggestions.
So I kind of wanted to talk about my own personal, like I want you to self-diagnose me. Like I want to know at what level of emotional eating should you now like stop and then try to deal with the situation. So like with me, I don't binge. I definitely
Mhm.
don't binge. I do like to eat. I'm a foodie, so I do like
Yeah.
small portions of yummy stuff. And, I like to snack here and there. I don't eat all day, but I don't always just, this is my mealtime. I'm sitting down now. This is when I'm eating. And then that's done for the whatever time period until it's my next meal. I will have a snack when I'm watching, TV or, I do crave chocolate and I'll make cookies. And I'm not going to lie, the last batch that I made, that yes, they were small
Mhm.
little cookies, but we ate the entire thing.
Mhm.
So, how do you know that you actually like you have a problem, you need to deal with it now, and like is it an actual issue? Like where is it rooted? How do you figure that all out?
Well, I think the first step is to recognize you're doing it. So if you are, if you can eat your meals and have a snack and, have one or two of the cookies and then be done and not feel the guilt and you just move on with your day, like to the next part of your day. And it's just another part of your experience, then I don't think you really struggle with emotional eating. But if you're eating your meal and then you're snacking and then you're starting to feel guilty and become critical and then you're going, now I need to restrict or now I need to go exercise or like, screw it, now I'm just going to like eat whatever I want for the rest of the day or just like eat more of this. Like, I think it's important that you start to understand what's going on with yourself and why are you wanting to emotionally eat. Like, do some journaling about it. And if this is something you've been struggling with for at least 6 months or more, like if it's been decades for you, I can't stress enough how important I think it is for people to get support, because it's been this long, you're still struggling. If you want change, and I mean this in an empowering way, but you probably need help because emotional eating has so many layers. It's so in depth between our emotional mental state and how that can trigger emotional eating through our thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and emotions, through physical imbalances like gut flora, for example. When your gut flora is out of balance, you naturally crave more carbs and sugar because those are the food sources. And so then that could be triggering you to binge and you don't even realize it. Hormone imbalances can trigger you to binge or make your cravings worse, right? Like, and those things can also make you hang on to weight or protection. Like, I really feel like the body hangs on to protection when he or she doesn't feel safe. So if you're hating your body, you're frustrated with your body because you can't lose weight and you keep dieting and it's not working, but yet you're self-sabotaging with food, like there's so many pieces of this puzzle that are just really difficult for you to figure out on your own unless you've been through it and you also have the expertise like in health and wellness to guide people. Like, thankfully for me, like I personally went through everything that I coach my clients on myself. I have the brain of the addict. I understand why we behave the way we do with food. I went through not feeling good enough. I went through the weight struggles. I balanced my hormones and my gut health over a 5-year period. Like I had significant health issues that I was able to address and, deal with. And luckily my body gave me a second chance, and I had the overbooked schedule. I had the exercise addiction, the diet addiction, like you name it, I went through it. So I think having that understanding allows me to have the relatability and go, no, you don't need another diet. You don't need another meal plan. It's not just about your personal trainer telling you to eat more macros. Like that stuff is not going to work. We need to deal with your mindset and your physical state of health together. And that's what gives people the freedom. And I think one of the most powerful things that I teach people is that learning how to listen to their bodies, learning how to build awareness, to stop and check in with themselves. Because once you learn how to do that and you understand what it feels like to have adrenal fatigue, or when you're really hungry or that you got too dehydrated, you can stop and you can go, I need to drink water right now, or you know what, I need to eat right now, or I need to do meditation right now. Like you actually start to figure out what you need. And that's one of the things I'm most grateful for to pass on to my clients, because like it's allowed me to get so in tune to the point where I know if my thyroid's a little bit off, or I know when my cortisol is a little bit high. Like I know exactly what those things feel like in my body. And then therefore I can take immediate action steps to correct whatever I feel like is going on, because I've just spent this last 10 years building this deep in tune relationship with myself and working with hundreds of women that are addressing similar issues. So that's why I think it's important for people to get help. Not saying it necessarily has to be me. Like great if you connect with me and you feel safe coming to me, because I hold a safe space, but really for you to go in a direction that feels empowering for you. I just think there's so much information out there as well, and I think that's another thing that blocks people from wanting to do anything, because you can go online and access the internet and read books, but how do you know what you need for your unique picture of health, your unique mindset, your unique set of circumstances? And so that's why I think it's also important to get support, because here's an example. Say you have underlying hormone issues. Say that your estrogen is really high and you have adrenal fatigue and your cortisol is really high. So you go online and you like search adrenal fatigue symptoms and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I think I have adrenal fatigue. And then you read the recommendations to support adrenal fatigue and it says, oh, like take a tablespoon of maca powder every day because it's good for, balancing out your cortisol levels. But then you don't realize you have this hidden estrogen dominance also going on, and that maca actually will boost your estrogen levels more and make that worse. So that's one of the things that I think is not so great about the internet and like just having access to tons of information, is it doesn't allow us to necessarily assess our current state of health and understand our hormone health and all the details of like our gut health and what we're uniquely going through. And then we're going online in hopes of finding, answers and relief. And we take on these recommendations, but we could potentially be throwing other things out of balance if we don't know the whole picture or how to deal with the whole picture, if that makes sense.
Totally. Now you've talked a lot about, things that we can do to heal from the behaviors and the emotional eating aspects and whatnot. So I want to break it down in simple steps for everybody listening. What is the best way to start that healing process when we become aware that there's an issue that we need to deal with?
Yeah. Step one, have compassion for yourself. You're not alone. You are not the only one struggling with this. You don't have to do it alone if you don't want to. So if you want to like first just tell somebody about it, like I always just say to people who listen to my podcast, or like when I'm a guest on another podcast, like if you just want to send me an email to just like get it off your chest, like it's all in confidence and like this is a safe space, right? So if that just helps you take a step forward, great. If you want to tell your mom, your brother, your friend, like share it if you feel safe and comfortable. If you don't, then that's where you maybe want to step right away into getting support. I think another powerful step that we can start to take upon building awareness is to actually, before we reach for the food or more food, to ask ourselves, am I physically hungry? Do I actually need to physically nourish my body, or is this emotional? Because if any other reason is emotional other than for physical hunger, you can start to go, interesting. So for instance, the cookies that you made, it's like for some people, I find a very popular trigger is the visual trigger, where now it's in the house, it's on the counter, I see it. I've had a couple, they taste really good. And so every time I go into the kitchen, I'm grabbing another one, or I'm sitting in the living room and I'm thinking about the cookies and I'm feeling tempted. So I go and grab another one. So it's like, if you have that visual trigger before you go back and have more, it's like, do I physically actually need to eat? And if this is too tempting for me, do I need to freeze them? Do I need to like go give them to the neighbor? Do I need to like, pack them up and send them in the lunch with the kids or the hubby or whatever? How do you want to navigate that? What feels empowering for you? I had one client the other day and she's like, I have one Christmas cookie in my freezer and I keep thinking about wanting to eat it and it's driving me crazy. And I'm like, well, what do you want to do about it? And she's like, well, I was either thinking about giving it to my husband or throwing it out. And I'm like, okay, what feels really empowering for you? And she's like, I just want to throw it out because it's going to give me peace of mind. And so she did it and emailed me after and she's like, I'm so grateful I did that. I feel so like calm and at ease and just like, more peaceful. And so there was times where I had to do that in the beginning, was just throw stuff out. And I know it's wasteful, but if it's going to save you from binge eating or emotionally eating, sometimes you've just got to do what you've got to do. But this physical emotional hunger question is so important. Another thing I think we can do in the beginning is to bring in a mindful eating practice, which to me, mindful eating is about sitting at your kitchen table without the distraction of your computer, your phone, your TV, any kind of technology on, shut it off. Music is fine, but what if you could engage in conversation with those around you? And if it's just you, have, flowers on the table, have your like favorite, picture on the wall, use your favorite cup or plate or whatever that is to make it special for yourself. And the goal is to sit and chew your food properly. Chew, 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 put your fork down between bites and really chew because digestion starts in the mouth. And that also allows you to check in between bites and go, how full am I feeling? Do I feel like I need quite a bit more? Or am I getting full? And you're far more likely to stop before you overeat. When we are distracted, multitasking, watching TV, doing other things while we eat, we're not present with food. We don't digest as well. We don't become as satiated. And we can actually eat up to 40% more when we are distracted. So that's pretty significant. So the mindful eating practice also helps. I think it's also important to eat regularly through the day, have our breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a snack between if you need them. And again, to try and be as present as you can. This is a great time to instill a mindful eating practice with having more time. So, build good habits now so that when, we do move forward with a new normal, you already have these great habits in place. And I think it's going to help, when things pick up or do get a bit busier again, depending on what you decide to do. I think past that as well, we can remove ourselves from the kitchen. We can go into another room and do self-care of some sorts, meditation, breathing, yoga, stretching, get out in nature for a walk, have social time over the phone with a friend or a family member, take a bath, take a shower, do dry skin brushing. If you have a home workout, do that. Get into a hobby, color, do an online course. Like, to shift the focus can also help. But if you're finding that you're listening to this and you're going, I'm trying to do all this, like it's not working, and then to me, like those are signs that, maybe reach out and get some support, have a conversation. Because if you're trying all these things, but you're still just feeling so pulled in, sometimes we just need that other person to talk to and guide us and be there to help through the vulnerability until we feel stronger and have a more solid foundation.
Amazing. I love those steps. I want to circle back now to your own personal experience so that we can give hope to those that are embarking on this
Hmm.
journey. How do you feel now compared to how you felt before? And what does your self love practice look like now that you've gone through this healing journey?
Thank you so much for asking that because it's so different. So 10 years ago was really when all of this consciously started for me, when the binge eating got really bad and I was starting to become aware of what was happening and what an issue it was. And I can tell you, I was very unhealthy. I was getting sick all the time. It would take me like weeks or months to get over a cold. My immune system was low. My digestion was a nightmare. I couldn't eat anything without getting bloated. It was so sensitive. I had all sorts of hormone imbalances. I had the high cortisol, the adrenal fatigue. My thyroid was underactive. I had the estrogen dominance. Yes, I was that girl who was trying to go online and read about hormones and like do it all on, my own, and like ate the maca, but then didn't realize I had the estrogen dominance, and then it made my estrogen go up. So like everything that I'm talking about, I pretty much, did to myself innocently and then had to like go back and correct it. So I get it. I was broke. I feared looking at my bank account. I was in a lack mindset. I worried about everything. I was so antisocial. I feared the world really, and just felt like a little ant that didn't want to be stepped on. I was very insecure and had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I really wanted to always be on Entertainment Tonight or like one of those entertainment shows. And so that's why I went to broadcasting school when I first graduated high school. But that's when like my whole world got turned upside down after I graduated. And it was just like, what? I have no idea what's happening or what I'm going to do. Fast forward to now, 10 years later, I have fully healed my relationship with food. I have no fear whatsoever of relapse or going back. I have a very mindful eating practice. And then sometimes, we bend the rules once in a while and we will have a snack in front of the TV, but I don't do it very often because I have a respect for mindful eating and, but I'm also not about rigidity and perfection. We're all human. I manifested my business that I've had for 7 years, manifested abundance. I'm not in a lack mentality anymore. I've healed my digestion and my hormones, and I've been able to significantly deepen the relationship that I have with myself, my intuition, my soul. I really feel like this is why I'm here on this earth. I manifested the most beautiful relationship, my soulmate. It like makes me want to cry because we actually dated 8 years ago, almost 9 years ago now. We dated for the first time and I just fell head over heels and always felt like he was like the one. And it didn't end up working 9 years ago. But I always just thought, universe, like, why, universe? Why? Like, I feel like there's no one else. Like, I just had this deep feeling, but I was like, I guess it mustn't be him if like it's not working out. But what I didn't realize at the time was I was so deeply struggling with my self-sabotage with food and self-hate and didn't feel good enough. And he also didn't feel good enough and had his own stuff. And so by us, releasing from each other and allowing ourselves to do that work on our own without even knowing we were doing the work, we came back together over 4 years ago. And it's been the most beautiful, loving, respectful relationship ever. And he loves himself. I love myself. We're whole and complete. And we come together and it's amazing. So, because before I was manifesting like alcoholics and guys who had like issues with alcohol. And of course I was because I was an addict myself. So, relationship, career, abundance, health, this inner peace. So, with everything going on right now, when I meditate, it's just this retreat. Like I feel so secure and safe and unstoppable when I do things like that. And little Amber, that 5-year-old Amber who just like had such a traumatic experience on the bus and with, some of her upbringing with everything going on, she is safe. She is happy. We've made peace with each other. I'm always there for her. I tune in and check in on her all the time and make sure she's okay. I've let her know I'm not going to abandon her and that I will always be here for her. And I think that going inside and connecting with our inner child and building that healthy relationship with them is so important. So it's literally like completely different person. I'm confident, I'm happy, I'm humble, I love myself. Don't obsess over the scale or any of that anymore. I just feel free. I feel free and I feel like I'm here to really serve a deep purpose. And I'm just so grateful for every single moment that I've lived through and everything I've experienced, all of it, the good and the bad, the ups and the downs, because it's created me to be the person I am today and allows me to help so many people with their own struggles with food. And that if I can do it, you can do it. That's honestly what I say. And I'm not just saying that, like, it's so true. Like I witness my clients every day, like so overcoming food addiction, whether they've had it for 5 years or 50 years, like transformation and change and freedom are fully possible if you are just like open to taking that first step forward. That's all you have to do is just one little baby step.
I love that. That's such a good story to hear, and how you've gone through all that and how you've come out a completely different person that is in such a better place and state at the end. And I think that will give a lot of people a lot of hope that this
Mhm.
is doable. You can
Yeah.
actually get through this, and at the end, you will feel like a whole new person and how you should actually feel.
Yeah, and I think one of the other powerful things that it really happened to me as this has all happened is it really helped me awaken that life just isn't the way that it is. It's not just like, oh, I have luck or I don't, or like, I'm going to have things or I'm not. Like it really got me into this like mindset and like manifestation, the laws of attraction and like the universe. And like there's such a bigger power at play. And if we're not happy with our reality, it's so important for us to go within and see what is out of alignment. And that has helped me feel so much more free with what's going on outside of, us right now. It's like, I know it's like, it's so weird and it's eerie and it's this like kind of scary scenario that's happening in the world, but that's in my analytical mind. When I tune into my intuition, there's this sense of peace, which may sound so crazy right now with everything going on, but I just deep down know that because I have the mindset and the tools and the people around me that I do, that everything is going to be okay because I have the power to still believe in miracles and that really great things are happening right now and I can still manifest what I want. And I think that's given me a lot of peace of mind through everything that's going on. And so that's another reason why I think it's so powerful to do this mindset work and like really build self-love, because it helps us through these times when we really, really need a peace or an inner retreat to go to.
Yeah, I totally agree. I want to talk about your business because now your business helps other people who have gone through similar situations that you have. And now you help them based on your experience and all the knowledge that you've built and how to get through that. So I want to talk about what you offer as coaching programs or whatnot, your podcast, how do you help others through your podcast and exactly what do you talk about on your podcast?
Yeah. So with the podcast, it's the No Sugarcoating podcast, as you mentioned earlier. And I really talk more in depth about all of the things that we've been talking about here today. So if you're wanting to learn more about emotional eating or hear more about my story or hear more about hormone health, immune health, gut health, cravings, overbooked schedules, resistance, food rebellion, body rebellion, weight struggles, why I quit exercising and challenge limiting beliefs around that, and like everything from like one end to the other, I talk about it or will definitely talk about it in an upcoming episode. Self-care, of course, too, but I do talk a lot about the mindset because all this stems from the mind. So that's a great resource for people to help plant seeds, help you to get to know me a bit better, see how you feel. If you think, well, you know what, maybe this is someone I do feel safe and comfortable reaching out to. And then regarding how I support my clients, I offer to connect with a 30-minute complimentary body freedom consultation. And so if you're really thinking, I really want to look at support, and some people may be thinking, I don't want to spend any money right now, but I actually am encouraging people that this could be something that can really help you navigate through this time with less suffering. Why? Because, it can feel really scary to be alone and just be eating or in self sabotaging behavior and not knowing what's going to happen. And think of how much more empowered you could be if you could stop emotionally eating, save that money, feel better about yourself, build confidence, and have a really great routine to cope with stress, to keep your immunity up. Like, I just think there's actually so much power right now and actually working on your health and your mindset. But anyway, yeah, for anyone who wants to connect, we talk about your goals, where you're struggling with your health, what's holding you back. And then I offer different programs. So I work with people, for, a 6-month period or a year period. I also just introduced a 3-month option because I wanted to just be as accommodating as I could to people and like their budgets right now. I do have payment plans as well. So, I talk about all of that in that call and provide you with information to just help you feel empowered and to make a decision that feels best for you. And then, of course, I also actually just started a private Facebook group called Choosing Body Freedom. So it's going to be a safe space for people to come and just, I'll share different information and do lives and just nurture people to let them know that they're not alone. So that's kind of how I'm supporting people right now. I am working on some other like online programs and different things, but they're just not quite ready yet. So people can stay tuned to my podcast, my website, and my Instagram, which is just my name, Amber Romaniuk, Romaniuk, for those upcoming announcements, which will be later in the spring or early summer. So I'm trying to just figure out however I can to help people, depending on where they're at and what they feel like they want to start with.
Amazing. That's so much to offer everyone. And I know that many people are going to benefit from any of that, really. There's just so much valuable information that you're sharing, which is just so awesome of you.
Thank you. I just want to share quickly, if I can, one thing that I've over the last week and a half, like there's been significant change, and it was kind of like shocking last week when everything just kind of got pulled out from under me, all the things I had booked and upcoming stuff. And I was like, oh my goodness. And then I'm like, I was coaching my clients last week, and at the end of the week, I was just like sitting in such deep gratitude because while all of these things got like canceled for now, the one recurring theme that happened through every call was my clients saying, I'm so grateful that I have been investing in this support physically, mentally, emotionally, etc., that I have your support because I'm not binging right now. I don't want to binge right now. I'm actually navigating this scenario with a lot more ease than I would have a month ago, 3 months ago, a year from now. And just having them say that, like, it just made me want to tear up. And I'm just like, this is why I'm so grateful that I get to do this, because it's helping people cope with this like once in a century scenario, like,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? And I'm just
Yeah.
like, this is why I'm here, because I want people to be able to get through this and not come out the other side feeling like, oh my gosh, now I've got to spend like 10 years like fixing myself or whatever, you know? So
Mhm.
it's so powerful to see when people do the work, like how much it can significantly impact your life in a positive way, even through times like this.
Yeah, it just sets you up for success on being able to navigate and handle things
Yeah,
when life throws you a curveball.
exactly.
That's amazing. So if anybody wants to learn more about you, where can they connect with you?
Yeah, so you can connect with me on my website at amberapproved.ca. I have a free emotional eating quiz, more information about what I do, how I work with people. And of course, that's where you can also find the complimentary consultation booking information. I have my podcast, the No Sugarcoating Podcast, available on all podcast apps as well. All episodes are on my website. And you'll find me most frequently on Instagram at Amber Romaniuk. That's Amber, Romaniuk. And that's where you'll find me online.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amber, for sharing your advice and your story. And I know many are going to benefit from hearing your experiences, and they're going to be able to apply so many takeaways from this episode in their lives.
Well, thank you so much for having me today and allowing me to share in your space. I really appreciate it. I'm so grateful for the opportunity, and just hope people know they're not alone with this.
Definitely. I'm Jessica, and thanks for tuning in today to Love Unplugged, the podcast. If there are any questions or topics you'd love answered on the show, head on over to www.projectloveco.com and share your request with me. If you haven't yet, go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast and share it with a loved one. Your feedback means the world to me, and the community we've created is what fuels our discussions here. After all, this is all for you. Join me next time for another unplugged conversation.